A single stone needle holds the untold stories of fallen empires. This obelisk is far more than a monument. It is a silent library written in a language we are just learning to read. By the end of our journey, you will understand how to hear the whispers of the ancient world. We will uncover why these stones were built with such impossible precision and what secret codes are carved into their surfaces. How do you think a civilization speaks to the future after it is gone? Standing at the base of such a monolith, you are confronted by a paradox of sheer physical force and delicate artistry. How do you move a mountain? Ancient engineers began their work not with cranes, but with patience. They located a flawless seam of granite and hammered trenches around it with stone tools, then drove wooden wedges into the cracks. When these wedges were soaked with water, they expanded with irresistible force, cleanly splitting the stone from the earth. This raw block, weighing as much as 1,000 elephants, then began a journey of hundreds of miles. It was loaded onto a massive wooden barge and floated down the river, a process requiring perfect timing with the annual floods. Upon reaching its destination, workers faced their most perilous task, erecting the needle. They built a gigantic earthen ramp, slowly inching the stone upward until it could be pivoted into a vertical position over a waiting foundation. The slightest miscalculation meant catastrophic failure. This was not brute strength, it was a symphony of coordinated labor, a testament to an empire that could command both the landscape and its people. The final form was a statement of absolute mastery. Its surfaces were polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the sun like a beacon. Its edges were cut with such geometric precision that they seemed to slice the sky itself. This perfection was the message. It declared that the empire had tamed chaos, bending nature itself to its will. The obelisk was not merely a stone, it was a captured ray of sunlight, a permanent symbol of order imposed upon the world. And it is upon this flawless canvas that the true, hidden language was inscribed. These intricate carvings are the first voice to break the silence. Etched into the rose granite with astonishing skill, the hieroglyphs form a tapestry of animal figures, human forms, and abstract shapes. At first glance, they might look like a gallery of beautiful pictures, but they are far more. This is a complete and sophisticated language, an alphabet of power where a single symbol could represent a sound, an entire word, or even a profound idea. The obelisk's surface becomes a permanent stone newspaper, announcing the divine right of a pharaoh to rule. The inscriptions detail military triumphs, listing conquered cities and captured treasures. They speak of deep devotions, recording elaborate rituals and gifts made to the gods to ensure the continued harmony of the universe. The key to reading this stone newspaper lies in the specific patterns. Look for the oval loops known as cartouches. These enclose the most sacred names, the royal names of the kings, setting them apart from the rest of the text like a bolded headline. Surrounding these are epithets, the grandiose titles a pharaoh adopted, such as strong bull or beloved of the goddess Isis. By deciphering this specific arrangement of names and titles, Egyptologists can do more than just guess who built the monument. They can identify the ruler with certainty and place the obelisk within the exact year of his reign, understanding the political message it was meant to broadcast. This language was never meant for the common person. It was a tool of statecraft designed for two audiences, the gods in the heavens and the educated elite on earth. Its purpose was to project an image of unchanging power and divine order, a narrative meant to last for all eternity. But as our eyes move across these symbols, we start to notice something else, a second, quieter story written not with ink or chisel, but with shadow and light. Centuries later, a new empire laid its hands upon the stone. Picture this same obelisk, but its surroundings have utterly changed. It no longer stands before an Egyptian temple bathed in desert sun. Instead, it casts its shadow upon the Roman Forum, surrounded by the marble and murmur of a different world power, and on its surface, a new language now speaks. Alongside the ancient hieroglyphs, Latin inscriptions were carved, celebrating the triumph of a Roman emperor. This was far more than simple graffiti. It was a deliberate act of cultural conquest, a powerful political statement written in stone. Rome was not just importing a beautiful object, it was claiming ownership of Egypt's entire legacy of ancient wisdom and divine authority. The Latin text actively repurposed the obelisk's original meaning. What was once a sacred Egyptian symbol of the sun god was now transformed into a trophy of imperial expansion, a monument to Roman military might. The very style of the lettering reveals this shift. The clean, sharp capitals of the Latin alphabet stand in stark contrast to the fluid hieroglyphs, projecting a different kind of order, one that is administrative and absolute. The grammatical choices and the content of the message are equally telling. They speak of subjugation, of victories won, and of an emperor's piety toward Roman gods, effectively rebranding the monument for a new audience. This created a palimpsest of power, a term for a manuscript where old text is scraped away to write something new. On the obelisk, the original Egyptian message was not erased, but it was now framed, overwritten by the voice of its new masters. The stone became a dialogue between empires, one ancient and one ascendant, and it shows us with stunning clarity that symbols are never fixed. They are constantly reinterpreted, their meanings reshaped to serve the ambitions of those who hold them next. And if you listen closely, beneath these two loud proclamations of power, you can hear a third, much older voice beginning to whisper, a voice that speaks not of empires but of the cosmos itself. But the grand pronouncements carved in sunlight are only half the story. To hear the whispers of those who truly built the stone, you must listen to what was buried beneath it. Before the first block was set for the foundation, ancient priests and engineers performed a sacred ritual, placing small objects in a pit directly under where the obelisk would stand. These foundation deposits were time capsules filled with model tools, ritual vessels, and inscribed plaques. They were not meant for human eyes, but as a message to the gods of the earth, a plea for stability and permanence. These objects speak of the spiritual framework that supported the physical one, revealing a society that believed its monuments needed divine approval to stand for eternity. Alongside these official offerings, we find a different kind of record, one left by the workers themselves. Hidden on the bottom of massive foundation stones, or in the dark spaces where no polished surface would ever be seen, are the marks of the quarrymen and masons. These are not the elegant hieroglyphs of the scribes. They are simple, practical notations, lines and symbols that formed a kind of blueprint. A series of dots might indicate the exact pivot point for rotating the stone. A hastily painted line could be a leveling mark. These are the instructions of the foreman, the on-the-ground intelligence that guided an impossible engineering feat. Sometimes we find even more personal traces, a name scrawled in a corner, a rough sketch of a face. These humble scribbles are the voices of the individuals, the master builders and laborers whose own histories were never recorded in the royal annals. Finding a single pot shard near the foundation, marked with a worker's note about his daily rations, does more than just date the construction. It connects us directly to the human scale of the endeavor. It reminds us that this symbol of imperial power was raised by thousands of hands, each with their own life, their own struggles, and their own pride in the work. This is the grit at the bottom, the reality that complements the glory at the top. The grand inscriptions tell us what the empire wanted to be remembered for, but these subterranean whispers tell us how it was actually built, by whom, and with what beliefs. When you put these two narratives together, the one written for the gods and the elites, and the one written by the workers for themselves, you finally get a complete picture of a civilization. And it is this complete picture that allows us to ask the next, even more profound question: what happened when the last chisel fell silent? The stone speaks its loudest when the sun touches the horizon. At dawn on the equinox, the obelisk's long shadow would stretch across the temple complex, its dark finger falling with perfect accuracy upon a specific stone marker. This was not a random effect. It was a stone calendar, a colossal timepiece tracking the sun's journey with breathtaking precision. The placement of these monuments was an act of celestial engineering, aligning them with the rising of stars like Sirius or the solstice sun. This embedded a cosmic language directly into the landscape. The structure became a permanent dialogue with the heavens, a way for the empire to demonstrate its harmony with the fundamental rhythms of the universe. This alignment was a form of communication with the divine, a physical prayer proving that human order reflected cosmic order. The specific angles and orientations we measure today are a kind of mathematical text, a code that reveals an advanced and practical knowledge of astronomy. They show us a world view where heaven and earth were not separate realms, but intimately connected parts of a single, living system. The obelisk was the bridge between them, a fixed point where the divine could touch the human world. By decoding these silent alignments, we do more than just admire ancient engineering. We begin to understand how these people saw their own place in the vast cosmos. They were not insignificant subjects of a king, but active participants in maintaining the balance of the universe itself. Every year, when the shadow found its mark, it reaffirmed that the pharaoh's rule was in sync with the gods. This celestial conversation was the ultimate source of their authority, written not in hieroglyphs but in light and geometry. And this profound connection to the sky raises a haunting question: what happens to a civilization when that connection is broken? High above, where the stone needle meets the open sky, rests the monument's true heart. The Pyramidian, a small, pyramid-shaped capstone, was the focal point of the entire colossal structure. Often sheathed in a brilliant alloy of gold and silver called electrum, this gleaming tip was designed to catch the very first and last rays of the sun each day, blazing like a captive star. It was far more than a decorative finish. It was a symbolic recreation of the Benben stone, the primordial mound that, according to Egyptian myth, was the first land to rise from the waters of chaos at the dawn of creation. This single piece connected the entire obelisk to the moment of origin, framing it as a tool of cosmic renewal. The inscriptions carved here were the most sacred of all, frequently dedicated to the sun god Ra. They served as a divine script, a magical formula intended to facilitate the pharaoh's soul's journey, allowing it to climb the sunbeams and join the eternal cycle of the gods. The very shape of the Pyramidian, a point aiming infinitely upward, was a concentrated expression of the obelisk's entire purpose. It was a lightning rod for the divine, a permanent point of contact between the earthly and the celestial realms. To analyze this pinnacle is to read the powerful conclusion of a grand thesis written in stone. It holds the key to the monument's ultimate spiritual message, that humanity, through its rulers, could not only mirror the order of the cosmos but actively participate in it. This silent conversation between earth and sky, however, could not last forever. A shadow eventually fell that was not cast by the sun, a silence descended that was not the peace of night, and the meaning of these stones was left to drift for centuries, waiting for a new kind of key to be found. Deep within the quarries of Aswan, the story of the obelisk begins not with a shout, but with a groan of stone. Here, an enormous, unfinished needle remains fused to the living bedrock, a monument to an ambition that was never lifted. This colossal fragment is the most honest teacher we have, a frozen moment in time that reveals the brutal, physical reality of creation. The surrounding rock walls are not silent. They are a chaotic chalkboard covered in the graffiti of the work crews. This is not the sacred language of priests, but a rough, practical script of production. We see leveling lines scored directly onto the granite, guiding the initial cuts. There are painted marks indicating where the teams of laborers should focus their efforts with their dolerite pounders, stone tools harder than the granite itself. These inscriptions are a proto-language, the fundamental grammar of construction that would eventually give rise to the polished poetry of the finished monument. They detail the ingenious, patient method of extraction. Workers would hammer a channel around the intended block, then drill holes into which they drove dry wooden wedges. When these wedges were soaked with water, they would swell with immense, silent force, cracking the stone cleanly from the earth. This was a conversation with the mountain, a dialogue of pressure and patience. But these marks are more than just technical notes. They are also a record of the people. The names of the quarry masters are inscribed here, alongside the reign of the pharaoh who commissioned the work, providing absolute dates that anchor these colossal projects in history. This is the birthplace of the obelisk's narrative, the moment when a random piece of the earth was first selected and imbued with a king's intention. The language here is one of sweat, mathematics, and coordinated labor, a stark and powerful contrast to the divine declarations that would later be carved onto its surface. It reminds us that before the stone could speak of gods and kings, it first had to be taught to stand. The river journey was a second birth for the stone, a transformation from a quarry block into a living symbol. Tomb walls and temple reliefs preserve this epic voyage in a vibrant language of logistics, a detailed comic strip of imperial power. We see the completed obelisk lying horizontally on a gigantic wooden barge, a vessel so immense it seems to be a floating piece of the landscape itself. This barge did not simply drift, it was pulled, a choreography of human force. Ropes as thick as a man's arms stretched taut, connecting to teams of laborers marching in unison along the riverbank. Their coordinated steps are a form of speech, a rhythmic declaration of collective purpose, but the true genius of this operation flows with the water. The entire journey was timed to coincide with the Nile's annual flood, when the river swelled, providing a natural aquatic highway for the colossal weight. Canals were dug specifically to connect the quarry to the main river channel, a permanent testament to this logistical language. These images are more than simple records, they are a bureaucratic script. Officials stand by, meticulously tallying workers and rations on their tablets, while priests conduct rituals at the water's edge, offering prayers to the river gods for a safe passage. This fusion of administration and faith reveals the two pillars of the state, the calculative mind and the spiritual heart, working in perfect harmony. The physical movement of the obelisk was itself a powerful message, a slow, undeniable demonstration of an empire that could command not just stone, but rivers, seasons, and the very muscles of its people. Every straining rope and every directed current was a word in a sentence that proclaimed, "We can move mountains." This journey of transformation, however, was merely the prelude to the stone's ultimate purpose, a purpose that would be sealed the moment it touched its final, sacred home. That single, elegant loop drawn around a name is one of the most powerful symbols ever carved. The cartouche was far more than a royal name tag. It was a magical fence, a protective cord that eternally encircled the king's identity and shielded his soul from chaos and oblivion. To inscribe a name within this oval was to secure its existence forever, binding it to the endless cycle of the sun. When you find a cartouche on an obelisk, you are looking directly at the monument's beating heart, the specific individual who dared to raise a stone to the sky. But the hieroglyphs inside tell a story far richer than just a name. They reveal a pharaoh's deepest aspirations. A king might choose a name that associated him with the god Ra, declaring himself the son of Ra to cement his solar authority. Another might select a throne name emphasizing his role as the living embodiment of Maat, the cosmic principle of order and truth. The cartouche was a concentrated dose of royal propaganda and personal faith, a single line of text that announced to both gods and mortals exactly how this ruler wanted to be perceived for all time. This makes the act of usurpation all the more dramatic. Sometimes the surface of an obelisk reveals a ghost, the faint, chiseled outline of an older cartouche that has been carefully erased and replaced by a new name. This was not mere vanity, it was a deliberate act of historical revisionism in stone. A later pharaoh, perhaps from a new dynasty, would literally carve his own legacy over that of his predecessor, stealing the monument's spiritual power and redirecting its eternal purpose to serve his own reign. He was not just claiming a stone, he was attempting to control the narrative of history itself. To decipher a cartouche, then, is to unlock the monument's original intent, and just as importantly, to see the political battles that raged long after its creator turned to dust. It is the key that separates one ruler's voice from the chorus of history, allowing us to hear his specific ambitions echo across thousands of years. The true language of the obelisk is spoken in its silhouette. Look beyond the carvings and see the shape itself, a masterclass in controlled illusion. Its sides are not perfectly straight lines, but incorporate a subtle, gentle curve known as intosses. This was a brilliant correction for the human eye, a calculated bulge that makes the towering structure appear perfectly straight and rigid when viewed from the ground. Without this curve, our perception would see it as slightly pinched, weakening its monumental presence. This is the first rule of its silent grammar, a non-verbal declaration that what appears as simple, brute force is actually a product of refined intelligence. The entire form is governed by a hidden mathematical code, a system of proportions that many scholars believe aligns with the golden ratio. This divine number, approximately 1.618, appears throughout nature, from the spiral of a nautilus shell to the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower. By encoding this ratio into the relationship between the obelisk's height, the width of its base, and the dimensions of its Pyramidian cap, the builders were weaving the fabric of the natural world into their creation. These proportions were never arbitrary. They were likely derived from sacred geometry, a system of design thought to hold cosmic power. The shape was intended to be more than just beautiful. It was meant to resonate, to generate a specific harmonic or spiritual effect on anyone who stood in its shadow. The perfect balance and upward thrust were a physical manifestation of the principle of Maat, the ideal of cosmic order and truth. Before a single hieroglyph could be read, the form itself communicated the empire's deepest values, balance, order, and a perfection that reached for the heavens. The stone was not just a canvas for writing, it was the very first word in a sentence written for the gods. That same iconic silhouette now pierces the sky over Washington, D.C., but its voice has been utterly transformed. The Washington Monument speaks a new language, one of democratic ideals and national unity, stripped of the divine pharaohs and sun gods of its ancestors. Its smooth, unadorned face is a deliberate choice, a rejection of the old world's royal hieroglyphs in favor of a clean, modern statement. The memorial stones inside, donated from every state and foreign nation, form a new kind of inscription, a collective voice of a republic. This is the obelisk's form translated across millennia, its symbolic power harnessed for a completely different kind of authority. The ancient shape, once a bridge to the gods, now became a bridge to a nation's founding principles. This act of cultural translation was not unique. In the 19th century, genuine Egyptian obelisks embarked on new journeys, traveling to the hearts of modern empires. The needles that rose in Paris, London, and New York were more than exotic trophies. They were bold declarations of a new world order. Their re-erection in these city centers was a symbolic conquest, a way for Western powers to physically possess and display the mystique of the ancient East, framing it within their own narrative of progress and global dominance. Each new foundation added another chapter to the stone's long biography. The London obelisk, known as Cleopatra's Needle, arrived with a time capsule buried beneath it, filled with Victorian-era items, from daily newspapers to a set of contemporary coins. This act mirrored the ancient Egyptian foundation deposits, but its meaning was entirely modern, a boast about the industrial age and the reach of the British Empire. The obelisk had become a versatile vocabulary, a single shape that could express imperial acquisition, civic memory, or national ambition, depending on who was speaking. Its journey through time created a polyglot of meanings where a single form could whisper of sun gods, shout of emperors, and now solemnly speak of a nation's enduring memory. The stone itself did not change, but the world reading it did, proving that the most powerful symbols are those flexible enough to hold every story we need them to tell. The final act of raising the obelisk was a sacred drama of cosmic proportions. As thousands of workers strained at ropes, inching the colossal stone up its earthen ramp, a chorus of priests performed the true work of creation. Their voices rose and fell with ancient spells drawn from the pyramid texts, incantations so powerful they were once reserved for the burial chambers of kings. This was not a mere blessing, it was a metaphysical engineering project. The priests were not just dedicating a monument, they were actively transforming it. With every recited syllable, they chipped away at its mundane reality, carving a new identity for the granite block. They chanted of the first moment of time when the Benben stone, the primordial mound, rose from the chaotic waters of none to catch the rays of the first sun. In this ritual, the obelisk being raised before them became that very same sacred object. Its slow, arduous journey to a vertical position was a reenactment of that cosmic dawn. The language used in these rites was performative, a kind of verbal magic where to speak a thing was to make it so. By declaring the stone to be a vessel of the sun god Ra, they believed they were filling it with his essence, charging it with divine energy like a battery. The ceremony was the final and most crucial inscription, one written not with a chisel but with sound and intention. It transferred the monument from the human realm to the divine, activating its purpose as a permanent conduit between earth and heaven. Without this spiritual ignition, the obelisk would have been just a large, well-carved rock. The ritual gave it a soul. This fusion of physical labor and sacred performance reveals a civilization that saw no separation between the act of building and the act of creation itself, where every raised stone was an echo of the birth of the world. Out in the stark emptiness of the desert frontier, the obelisk transformed from a spiritual beacon into a territorial command. Here, far from the temples and crowds, its solitary presence was a legal document carved from a mountain. The inscriptions shifted from cosmic prayers to direct proclamations of law. The hieroglyphs listed the pharaoh's official titles and declared the absolute boundaries of his control. serving notice to any nomadic tribe or rival kingdom that crossed into view. This was the empire's way of drawing a line in the sand, a line that could not be erased by wind or time. The stone itself was the authority, its sheer mass and permanence giving weight to the words. A traveler encountering this monolith on the horizon understood the message instantly. You are now entering the land of a god-king, and his power extends even to this desolate place. The warning was implicit in its very existence, a silent but potent threat backed by the full military might of the state. These frontier markers were the ultimate expression of administered space, turning abstract borders into an undeniable physical reality. They communicated sovereignty not through a passing herald, but through a monument meant to outlast the empire that raised it. This stone sentinel spoke a language of control that echoed across the empty landscape, a permanent claim on a territory that would one day forget the name of the king who ordered it. The sharp edges that once sliced the sky are now softened, rounded by the patient, relentless hand of the atmosphere. This weathering is not destruction, but a new kind of writing, a slow, geological text being inscribed over the human one. The wind, armed with fine grains of sand, has acted like a gentle but persistent sandblaster, smoothing hieroglyphs and polishing surfaces over thousands of years. Its direction is recorded in the very contours of the stone, revealing the prevailing winds that have swept across this land for centuries. The patterns of pitting and discoloration are a chemical archive of the air itself, telling scientists about ancient rainfall, atmospheric pollution from long-vanished industries, and even the global dust from distant volcanic eruptions that settled upon its face. Sometimes the stone was completely submerged, buried for centuries under desert sands that protected its lower halves, leaving a stark line between a perfectly preserved inscription and a surface worn almost blank. This natural editing process creates an accidental emphasis. A deeply carved royal cartouche might stand in bold relief, while the finer, shallower texts around it have faded into a ghostly whisper. This patina of age is the non-human voice in the monument's story, a chronicle of its long dialogue with the earth and the elements. To read this text of decay is to understand that the obelisk was never a static object, but a participant in an ongoing environmental story, forever changing and being changed by the world around it. Its surface now holds two intertwined histories, one of imperial ambition and one written by the silent, patient forces of nature. A silent monolith can still have a voice. The solid granite of an obelisk is not acoustically dead. It is a dense medium that can carry sound with surprising clarity. If you were to strike its surface with a mallet, it would not produce a dull thud, but a clear, resonant chime, a deep tone that seems to vibrate up from the very core of the earth. This was likely no accident. The precise mathematical proportions that gave the obelisk its perfect visual form may have also been tuned to a specific resonant frequency. Imagine the effect during a grand ceremony with rows of priests chanting in unison. Their voices would not just echo off the stone, they would be amplified and shaped by it, the monument itself acting as a colossal soundboard. The entire structure could become a resonant chamber, transforming human speech into something immense and otherworldly. This sonic environment would have a profound psychological impact on everyone present. The low, pervasive hum vibrating through your feet and chest is not just heard, it is felt, bypassing conscious thought to evoke a primal sense of awe. In such a state, the boundary between the self and the divine could feel thinner, more permeable. This theory suggests the obelisk was a multi-sensory instrument of power. Its visual grandeur commanded the eyes, its celestial alignments marked the passage of time, and its hidden acoustic properties orchestrated the very emotions of the participants. The stone did not just symbolize a connection to the gods, it engineered a physical and psychological experience of that connection, using sound as its most direct and visceral language. This potential for an auditory layer forces us to listen to the past in a completely new way, to hear the ghost of a ceremony not just in the carvings we see, but in the vibrations we can almost feel. But for centuries, the stone stood silent, its true voice lost. As empires fell and languages faded into history, the knowledge of how to read the hieroglyphs vanished completely. The obelisk became a beautiful, impenetrable mystery. In the minds of medieval and Renaissance scholars, these monoliths were not monuments to pharaohs, but ancient libraries of a different kind. They saw the hieroglyphs not as a written language, but as a collection of perfect, divine symbols. Each carved bird and serpent was not part of a sentence, but a self-contained emblem of profound, hidden wisdom. They believed these stones were placed by a primordial race of sages, an enlightened civilization that had encoded the secrets of the universe into these pictorial puzzles. This was the age of Hermetic philosophy, a worldview that sought to uncover a single, lost truth believed to be at the heart of all ancient religions and sciences. To these thinkers, the obelisk was the ultimate Hermetic text. Its shape and its symbols were a direct line to this pure, primal knowledge, a physical key to spiritual alchemy and the hidden workings of nature. The stone was reinterpreted through a mystical lens. Its long, tapering form was seen as a giant needle, stitching the fabric of the earth to the heavens above. It was an antenna designed to draw down celestial energies and cosmic influences, anchoring them to our world. In esoteric art and literature, the obelisk became a central symbol of this quest for enlightenment. Alchemists saw in its journey from rough stone to polished pinnacle a mirror of their own great work, the transformation of base matter into spiritual gold. These allegorical readings, while historically inaccurate, created a powerful and enduring mythology. They wove a new narrative around the stones, one of secret societies, lost wisdom, and the promise of unlocking the universe's greatest mysteries. This layer of legend is not a corruption of the obelisk story. It is a vital part of its biography. It reveals that the human drive to find meaning is just as powerful as the drive to build. When the original language was forgotten, we did not see an empty stone. We projected our deepest hopes onto its surface, writing a new chapter in our never-ending conversation with the past. The stone's true voice was trapped behind a beautiful, unbreakable code for over 1,000 years. Then, in the rubble of a forgotten fort near the Nile Delta, a soldier in Napoleon's army unearthed a slab of black granite that would become the most important key in history. This was the Rosetta Stone, a bureaucratic document from the reign of King Ptolemy V. Its power lay not in its content, which was a fairly ordinary priestly decree, but in its form. The same text was inscribed in 3 different scripts: ancient Greek, the Demotic Egyptian used for everyday affairs, and the sacred hieroglyphs. For the first time, scholars had a parallel text, a linguistic bridge to a lost world. The race to decipher it was an intellectual battlefield. For years, brilliant minds across Europe made little progress, trapped by the old assumption that each hieroglyph was a pure symbol representing a whole idea. The breakthrough came from a French linguistic prodigy, Jean-François Champollion. He was obsessed with ancient Egypt and possessed a near-superhuman grasp of languages. Champollion focused on the royal names enclosed in cartouches, reasoning that even the Egyptians would spell a foreign ruler's name phonetically, using sounds. He took the name Ptolemy from the Greek section and matched its letters to the symbols in the corresponding hieroglyphic cartouche. This gave him a phonetic alphabet. But the true eureka, a moment arrived with another cartouche, this one for the name Cleopatra. The symbols matched the sounds he had already deciphered from Ptolemy, confirming his theory beyond any doubt. Hieroglyphs were not just mystical symbols, they were a complex mix of sound signs and idea signs, a complete, functional language. In 1822, Champollion rushed into his brother's office, threw his notes on the desk, and shouted, "I've got it." Before collapsing in a days-long stupor of exhaustion, he had not merely translated words, he had flung open a door to an entire civilization. The silent libraries of stone, the obelisks that had stood as mute sentinels for centuries, suddenly had a voice. We could finally hear their stories, not as guesses or legends, but as the direct words of the people who carved them. This was the moment the obelisk's secret language was truly born again, transforming every monument from a beautiful mystery into a talkative historian. For the ancient Egyptians, the sun was not a distant star but a living god whose daily journey was the very heartbeat of existence. The obelisk was their attempt to capture a piece of that divine essence in stone, to create a petrified ray of sunlight anchored permanently to the earth. This was far more than a poetic metaphor, it was a core tenet of their theology. They envisioned the sun's rays as a physical staircase, a luminous ladder descending from the heavens. The pharaoh, in his role as the son of Ra, could use this sacred structure to make his own ascent after death, climbing the sunbeams to join the eternal cycle of the gods. The obelisk was that staircase made permanent, a frozen path of light offering a guaranteed passage to the afterlife. This metaphysical function was amplified by its brilliant capstone. Sheathed in electrum, an alloy of gold and silver, the Pyramidian was designed to ignite at dawn and dusk. As the first and last light struck this gleaming tip, the entire monument would seem to burst into flame, transforming from silent stone into a blazing beacon of communication. It was a giant device for talking to the divine, its light a signal fire visible to the gods themselves. This daily performance of light was the monument's truest and most profound inscription. The slow crawl of shadows across its precisely angled faces acted as a celestial clock, marking the passage of sacred hours. The sharp, clean lines of the shadow at noon spoke of order and clarity, while the long, distorted forms of twilight hinted at the mysteries of the coming night. This ever-changing display was a constant, silent reinforcement of the solar connection, a dialogue between the solid, human-made world and the fluid, powerful realm of the cosmos. Before a single hieroglyph could be understood, the obelisk was already preaching its primary sermon in the universal language of light, a silent testament to a civilization that built its hopes for eternity not just in stone, but in the very rays of the sun. A single name, crudely scratched near the base of a foundation stone, speaks with more intimacy than any royal title. These are the workers' signatures, the graffiti left by the hands that truly built the empire. Far from the polished hieroglyphs of the elite, these marks form a raw, alternative language. A simple doodle of a fish might reveal a worker's hometown by the river. A row of tally marks could count the days until payday or the number of blocks moved. Sometimes we find a joke carved in a hidden corner, a caricature of a foreman, or a brief complaint about the heat. This is social history written in stone, not by scribes, but by the quarrymen, masons, and laborers whose individual lives were never recorded in the official chronicles. These informal texts add a crucial layer of social commentary to the monument. They remind us that this symbol of absolute power was raised by people with sore muscles, inside jokes, and personal grievances. Finding the name Penpot, son of Kamu, scrawled on a quarry wall does more than just give us a name. It reconnects us to the human scale of this impossible endeavor. It forces us to balance the pharaoh's grand narrative of divine order with the reality of the thousands of anonymous individuals who made that narrative physically possible. Their voices, though often faint and unofficial, provide the essential counterpoint to the state's propaganda, creating a complete and deeply human story where the glory at the top is forever grounded by the grit at the bottom. That gift of stone was a carefully crafted sentence in a global conversation. When Egypt presented the Luxor obelisk to France in the 19th century, it was far more than a generous gesture. It was a sophisticated act of geopolitical messaging, using the ancient monument as its vocabulary. The ruler of Egypt, Muhammad Ali Pasha, was not merely clearing space, he was forging an alliance. By gifting this unparalleled symbol of pharaonic power, he was acknowledging France as a peer and a partner, a calculated move to secure European support for his own modernizing regime. The obelisk became a token in a diplomatic exchange, its immense weight conveying the seriousness of the relationship, yet the journey itself was the real declaration. The feat of transporting the granite needle from the banks of the Nile to the center of Paris was a spectacular demonstration of French engineering and naval might. It was a performance of imperial reach, a physical proof that France could pluck a piece of antiquity from the heart of the East and replant it in its own capital. The public ceremony that accompanied its erection in the Place de la Concorde was a powerful piece of theater. It communicated to the world that France saw itself as the legitimate heir to the classical and Egyptian civilizations, the new standard-bearer of universal order and enlightenment. This was not an isolated event. Look at the obelisks that stand in Istanbul, taken from Egypt by Roman emperors centuries before. Their presence in the capital of the Ottoman Empire told a similar story of conquest and inherited legacy, a visible chain of power linking one empire to the next. The movement of these stones across the modern map continues their ancient role as the ultimate symbols of prestige. Where they are placed and by whom writes a continuous text of international relations. A nation that possesses an obelisk, whether through gift or force, is making a statement about its place in the world order, using the silent authority of the past to bolster its own soft power in the present. These monoliths are never just decoration, they are permanent ambassadors, their shadows tracing the shifting lines of global influence across the centuries. Measure the obelisk with a surveyor's precision, and its dimensions begin to whisper a different kind of secret. The numbers themselves form a hidden language, a code of eternity written in lengths and ratios. Its height is not a random measurement but a carefully chosen number of royal cubits, a unit of length sacred to the Egyptians. This specific count often held cosmic significance, perhaps aligning with a celestial cycle or a mythological number of creation. The perimeter of the base, multiplied or divided, might reveal the number of days in a solar year. This was not a coincidence. It was a deliberate act of weaving the fabric of time and the heavens directly into the stone's very form. The builders were embedding universal, unchanging truths into a perishable material, creating a permanent testament to their understanding of the cosmic order. The most profound codes are found in the ratios, the relationship between the height and the width, or the proportions of the Pyramidian cap, often align with mathematical constants like the golden ratio, approximately 1.618. This divine proportion appears throughout nature, in the spiral of a seashell or the arrangement of petals on a flower. By encoding it into the obelisk, they were stating that their creation was in harmony with the fundamental patterns of the universe itself. Some theories suggest these ratios could even be subtle references to grand celestial mechanics, like the slow, 26,000-year precession of the equinoxes or the relative orbits of planets. This implies a grasp of astronomy that seems astonishing for its time, knowledge typically attributed to much later civilizations. To read this abstract layer, you need a mathematical lens. You must see the obelisk not just as a monument, but as a calculator, a permanent stone computer storing advanced knowledge for the future. While the hieroglyphs on the surface shout the glory of a specific pharaoh, the silent numbers woven into its geometry whisper the timeless secrets of the cosmos. The obelisk we see today is a ghost of its former self. Its surface, now a weathered gray, was once a riot of symbolic color. These stones were not meant to be monochrome. They were polychrome masterpieces, painted in vibrant pigments that formed a visual language as complex as the hieroglyphs they accompanied. Every hue was a deliberate choice, a word in a chromatic vocabulary. Red, made from ochre, represented the chaotic power of the desert and the god Set, a force that needed to be controlled. Brilliant blue, crafted from precious lapis lazuli, was the color of the heavens and the life-giving waters of the Nile, symbolizing creation and rebirth. But the most sacred color was gold, considered the flesh of the gods themselves. When a pharaoh's name was painted in gold leaf, it was not a mere decoration. It was a theological declaration, stating that the king shared in the divine, immortal substance of the deities. Traces of these powerful pigments still linger, hidden deep within the most protected grooves of the carvings, safe from thousands of years of sun and wind. Finding a speck of ancient blue in the crevice of a hieroglyph is like finding a single, surviving word from a forgotten song. This evidence confirms that the obelisk was designed to be visually stunning, a brilliant slash of color against the stark desert landscape, impossible to ignore. And high above it all, the Pyramidian cap did not merely reflect light, it generated it. Sheathed in electrum, a shimmering alloy of gold and silver, this pinnacle would have blazed in the sunlight, appearing as a captive star, a second sun anchored to the earth. This material brilliance was not an accessory to the message, it was the message. The color and sheen of the stone communicated meaning as potently as its shape and its text. To see the obelisk only in its current, stripped state is to read a book with half the pages faded. We must restore these radiant hues in our mind's eye to finally hear the monument speaking in its complete, overwhelming voice. This symphony of color and light reveals a civilization that understood power was not just carved but painted. That mirror finish was more than a display of skill, it was a philosophical statement. The highly polished sides of a newly erected obelisk acted as colossal, convex mirrors, capturing a distorted reflection of everything around them. They did not show a perfect image of the temple complex, the sky, or the people who approached, but a warped and flowing version of reality. This was not a flaw, it was the entire point. To see your own stretched and blurred form on its gleaming surface was a deeply personal experience. You were no longer just an observer, you were physically incorporated into the monument's symbolic world. Your reflection, mingling with the carved images of gods and kings, suggested a blurring of the ultimate boundary, the line between the mortal and the divine. The obelisk did not just point passively toward the sun, it actively captured and contained its light. On a bright day, it would have been nearly impossible to look at directly, a self-contained source of brilliance that rivaled the sky itself. This created a dynamic interface between the stone, its environment, and every single person who stood before it. It was an interactive form of communication, a silent dialogue of reflection that forced the viewer to see themselves as part of a grander, divine order. The monument was not just speaking to you, it was showing you your place within its story. Even our punctuation marks carry the ghost of the obelisk. That small cross you see next to a footnote or a date of death, the dagger symbol, is formally known as an obelisk. Its name is a direct linguistic descendant, a miniature monument on the printed page. This was not a random borrowing. Early scholars saw the obelisk's form, a vertical line tapering to a point, and distilled its essence into a mark that signifies a reference, a note, or an end. The irony is profound. The same shape built to promise eternal life is now used in typography to denote a mortal end. This is just one thread in a vast tapestry of influence. The 19th century's decipherment of hieroglyphs sent a shockwave through the worlds of art and design. For the first time, Western artists could see the Egyptian alphabet not as chaotic pictures, but as a system of clean, powerful, and geometric forms. This revelation directly fueled movements like Art Deco, which embraced the sharp angles, the sunburst motifs, and the streamlined symmetry found on ancient monuments. Look at the sleek skyscrapers of that era. Their stepped crowns and stark silhouettes are modern obelisks, speaking a language of progress and machine-age power that owes a deep, unacknowledged debt to the Nile. The shape itself has become a universal shorthand. On a map, a small obelisk icon does not need a label. We instantly understand it marks a significant memorial. In the digital world of video games, a glowing obelisk signifies a save point, a place of permanence and safety within a fleeting virtual landscape. We have internalized its meaning so completely that we no longer need to explain it. The stone's voice has been absorbed into our global visual vocabulary, communicating concepts of achievement, memory, and the human desire to mark our presence long after we are gone. Without a single carved word, its form continues to speak across the centuries, proving that the most enduring language is not always made of letters, but of shapes that have been imbued with the weight of history.